Welcome to this DVD where we're going to be looking at a repertoire for black after e4, which involves the classical move e5. This is a very straightforward and solid way to play and can be highly recommended to club players. The responses I will be recommending for black are by and large extremely reliable and will suit the club player for their ease of understanding and ability to just play them naturally and straightforwardly. We don't want too complicated a repertoire for black. We're aiming for straightforward play. I guess we have to consider white's second moves first. Moves like f4, moves like knight c3, moves like d4, independent moves other than knight f3. And so the first opening I'm going to consider is d4, the immediate opening of the centre game in fact, which could turn into a Danish gambit. It's an opening which went out of fashion for a long while. I mean, it was played by players such as Mises back in the 1920s, didn't really catch on, and it wasn't seen again really till the 1990s, when creative grandmasters started to experiment with queen takes d4 in this position, and they started to win some games. Needless to say, black has good responses against queen takes d4. We'll be looking at that next, but I first of all want to consider the Danish gambit. This is the type of thing mad attacking club players tend to use, particularly if they've studied books like Gambitier from Grandmaster Nigel Davis, where he recommends this way of playing. Young players might play this as well. They like to open up the game. They like to go after f7 early. They like to create complications. They like to sacrifice. Well, we are going to diffuse all that with d5. I think this is a very good move. It leads to a position where black is equal without too much trouble. It enables black to bring out the pieces quickly. It's straightforward too. This is exactly what black needs. At the grandmaster level, you might need something a bit more complicated, so you play one of the other continuations. But remember, we're concentrating on straightforward play. So in view of the attack on e4, white generally takes on d5. I mean, there aren't really many other moves. Believe it or not, Bolligan once played e5 in a rapid game against a 2100 player. Well, I think there just d takes c3. White can actually claim no compensation for the pawn in this position, as after knight takes c3, black goes d4. Meanwhile, after b takes c3, black just plays knight c6. In either case, with a nice free game and an extra pawn. This was one experiment I doubt Bolligan will be repeating, as he failed to beat this 2100 in a game from Calvi 2008. So going back to our feature game, which is Herzog versus Fleer, two very strong players from Graz 1984, white took on d5 and black recaptured with the queen, so it can't be more straightforward than that. White took on d4 and now black started to put pressure on the centre immediately with knight c6. And in fact what we're doing is transposing back into a Goring gambit declined. So actually the way we're playing this with black can be used also against the Goring gambit, which we'll be looking at a little later on this DVD. So the characteristic of black's game is that all these pieces can come out freely. Fleer played bishop to g4. White breaks the pin, and now comes bishop to b4 check, another good move. Now it's worthwhile pointing out in this position that black cannot win a pawn with bishop takes f3. This is in fact a serious error, as after bishop takes c6 check, white takes away the protection from black's queen and black loses the game. Going back to the game itself, bishop b4 check just straightforwardly develops the bishop, and Herzog plays knight to c3. Now comes Capablanca's old continuation, bishop takes f3, a gratuitous sacrifice of the bishop it seems, but black's idea is to go queen c4. And this is a surprisingly difficult move to meet. We're going to be taking a look in the next game at various continuations for white from this position, but in my opinion none of them give him any sort of advantage. Herzog tries a very dubious move here, bishop e3. He's trying to, by sacrificing a pawn, get some chances against the black queen. For instance, white's threatening a move like rook c1 here. But black plays very accurately. He plays queen c4 to extricate his queen, and then he goes knight ge7, giving the knight on c6 reinforcements. Rook c1, and now Fleer captured on a2. Well, it's obvious that white's got to stir up some trouble pretty quickly, and he tried d5. Black put his knight in on e5, and now bishop e4. Otherwise that bishop would just be removed. And now black played f5. White must find something quick here, or he's going to be losing on material. He tried rook c2, black went queen b3, and now d6, opening up the game. And the point of d6 is that if black takes this, then we go rook c8 check, with a discovered attack against the unprotected black queen. Fleer is on the ball, and he goes rook d8. Queen h5 check g6, d takes e7, and then g takes h5. Saw white's position in ruins. We just dropped back to the position after rook d8. It was getting very difficult for white. I mean, his position is creaking. The pawn on d6 is pinned. Black's threatening rook takes d6. Black's also threatening to take this bishop off. Queen h5 check smacks of desperation. And now g6 just leaves too many white pieces attacked. So, summarising, I'm going to be recommending d5. This line can be used against both the Goring Gambit and the Danish Gambit, and is thus a multifunction idea. It worked well in this opening game. Let's go on in the next game to look at other things that white can do against it. In our first example, we saw a very efficient way to deal with the Danish Gambit. Black declines the gambit, preferring the classical d5, a method recommended by Capablanca. The nice thing for us is that this method can be used also against the Scotch Gambit. So what I'm going to do is to wind the game back to the start, and we're going to have a look at a game from the Guernsey Open in 2009 between Ian Heppel, an English player who's graded about 2100, and Grandmaster Oleg Kornaev, where this was in fact the move order. Scotch Gambit move order. Heppel played 3d4, e takes d4, now c3. Well, d5 is equally playable here, and should transpose back into our favoured position. White generally takes this pawn, black recaptures. This is classical stuff by black, free flowing development. And white took on d4. Black pinned the knight on f3, and white played bishop e2. Now, there is an interesting line here after knight c3. Against this move, I would probably prefer black just for an easy life to play bishop b4. This should take us back into our main line. But if you feel like speculating or playing a very sharp position, you can play bishop takes f3 here. Then we get knight takes d5, bishop takes d1, and white plunges in and takes the rook. The problem I have with this line from black's perspective is that actually it takes him quite some time to round up that knight on a8, if he rounds it up at all. For instance, the main line goes bishop d3, black plays bishop g6, takes, and now white plays a very good move here, king to d1. White's only the exchange up in this position, and it looks as though his king could come under serious fire, but I think he can recuperate here with king c1, bishop d6 now, and rook d1. This is the type of thing that makes me think it's not quite so easy for black, this variation at all. The computers say this is good for white. Well, it's possible black might find an improvement in a variation like this, but it's also possible that this is good for white. But as I say, after knight c3, black can just go bishop b4. Returning to Heppel versus Kornaev, white played the standard bishop e2, and now we see the check. Knight c3, takes, and now Capablanca's idea, queen c4. Frustrating white in his desire to castle and putting pressure on c3. You'll note also that d4 is under pressure. Now this variation, from white's perspective, took on a lease of life about 30-40 years ago when Leonard Barden recommended it for white in the Guardian chess book, and he gave loads of interesting possibilities for white. He felt that the main line then, as it is now, is probably bishop takes c6 check. But now, as then, black gets a good game by carefully recapturing with the pawn. This is an important move, keeping the black queen on an awkward square in the middle of white's camp. Better than queen takes c6. Just going back to queen c4, queen b3 has also been played. But there, I think, after queen takes b3 and then knight ge7, black gets a very comfortable game. If white castles, threatening knight b5, black can play the careful a6. And if rook a4, we go bishop d6. with a better position for black. I prefer black despite white's 2 bishops because of white's fragmented pawn structure. So going back to queen c4, we've got bishop takes c6 check, b takes c6, and now white tries to get a better endgame after queen e2. The problem is that this is not an endgame, it's still a middle game despite the absence of the queens, and black has very active play against white's king here. He's immediately putting pressure on d4, this is the theoretical line by the way, and now so white plays bishop e3. And now black profits from not yet having developed that knight on g8 by playing his knight to e7. The grandmaster treats this position in a model way. After rook h d1, black played rook h e8 with the idea of knight f5. This is the problem for white. He can't nail the position down. He's got to... It takes him quite some time to nail the position down. For instance, Heppel played rook ac1, black played knight f5, again renewing the threat to this pawn on d4. And white's really got to play a move like king f3 in order to extricate himself from the threats. But now Kornaev played another excellent move, rook to d6, not only protecting the pawn on c6 from attack, introducing ideas along the third rank to further attack the white king. Heppel gave his king a square, and now another idea from black, bishop a5. Now white's pawn on d4 is under fire, thanks to the simple idea of bishop b6. And rook d6 has also enabled Kornaev to play rook e d8. So it may well be that white actually can't even save his pawn on d4 in this position, even here. Knight a4 was answered by bishop b6. Black doesn't mind at all if white plays knight takes b6, reconnecting black's pawns. Instead, white played rook c4, and black doubled up on d4. So there we are, this pawn is going down the drain. King e4 was answered instructively by rook f6. And king d3, well, if bishop to g5 in this position, at the very least, black has rook e8 check. King d3 was answered by bishop takes d4. Bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, and white saw to dismay that if he goes rook takes d4, we just take it and go rook d6 check, winning. So Heppel played rook dc1 and simultaneously resigned this position, as knight b3 discovered check, wins the house. So just summarising, going back, our idea of a quick d5 works against both the Danish gambit and the Goring gambit. In this game, we saw that the d5 break enabled black to develop freely and easily, and it gives black an easy life. And this is why I can strongly recommend this method to you.